So welcome everybody to Integrate Yourself. We're your hosts, Allison Pillow and Maya Gottlieb. You can find me, Allison, at pureenergypdx.com, and you can find Maya at mayagottlieb.com. Today we're here with a fantastic guest and a very good friend of mine. Her name is Dr. Monserrat Andreys, and she's actually my chiropractor. She's helped me with so many issues in my own body because I've been a gymnast in the past and, unwinding a lot of injuries I had through gymnastics. And it kind of becomes pretty complicated and complex when you come from a sport like that. And she's also come from a similar background. She's a dancer, and we'll get into that a little bit more as well. But just a little bit of background on Dr. Andreys. She's received both her doctorate in chiropractic medicine and a master's degree in sports and exercise science from the University of Western States in Portland, Oregon. Her BA in dance with an emphasis on flamenco was earned at the University of New Mexico, and her massage certification came from the Chicago School of Massage Therapy. And so I'm not going to go into like the rest of your bio, Monserrat, because I know that there's just an interesting story of how you got inspired by your grandmother, who was a midwife and herbalist, and I would really love to hear you talk about that as well, and how you got into the whole the profession of healing and helping people, heal their spine and take care of their spine as well. And you're really great about helping people, not just adjusting people and sending them on their way. You're really awesome at giving people homework and things that they can do on their own to empower themselves, to know that they have control over, their own pain or their own function, and they can always use those tools when they need them. So thank you, Monserrat, for coming on, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here. Well, I mean, to answer your question, it does really go back in my family. Really, the most that I know is as far back as my great-grandmother, who was born in Honduras in Central America. And she wasn't able to be educated when she was a small child. She was kind of given to a family to do labor for them. And so when she was in her late teens or early 20s is when she kind of came back and started her own life. And in the process of that, fell in love and started having children. And the midwife that she worked with really recognized that she was incredibly bright, and asked her if she wanted her to mentor her into midwifery. And so in the process of her learning to become a midwife, she learned a lot of skills. She learned how to do a lot of soft tissue work. She learned herbology local to that area. And then, of course, how to deliver children and how to care for mothers and how to care for the babies, in their first few days or hours. And so she gained so much knowledge and so many skills, which was exceptionally remarkable in my opinion, because she was illiterate, since she had never had the opportunity to go to school. Like, it all had to just stay in her memory. She couldn't take notes. She couldn't write things down and reference it later. Everything had to be an instant download. And so, in our family, she's really, I really revere her because I feel like she just had this exceptional mind and ability. And as her children came up, they weren't as interested in the healing arts, but they got different children got different skills and talents from her. And my grandmother really had the skill of touch. And so she would massage people. And when I was a little girl here in Chicago, I remember people coming over to the house, and in Latin America, it can be perceived to be your gift from God when you have a talent like that. So you're supposed to just give it to your community for free. And people would barter, you know, they would bring casseroles, or they'd be like, oh, we'll fix your car next time it's not working, you know. And so people would come over to the house all the time. And at the time, you know, now it's funny to me, but she would tell them after she evaluated them the first time, bring me a jar of Vaseline that's this big. So of course, you know, now the thought of being rubbed down with Vaseline is like horrifying to me, but at the time that was really cool. I'm like, it's petroleum products. But that was basically her treatment plan, you know, like, I will work on you until this size jar is done.
Oh, wow.
And I remember seeing that, you know, and she would make grown men cry. I mean, the things she would do to them, I would just kind of be leaning against the wall watching, and she would just be really focused and really diligent and moving their bodies around, and she would just do all this stuff, and I was just like amazed, you know. And so that was a big influence that I just got to observe. And so when it was time for me to decide on my studies in university, I thought that I wanted to study physical therapy, because that's kind of, it sounded like what my grandmother was doing. And I very quickly realized that it was completely different. And so I actually left university after a year, to the horror of my family, because even though my great-grandmother wasn't educated, she believed majorly in education. So I was third generation to be university educated. My grandmother was valedictorian of her school. My mom was salutatorian of her school. And then I dropped out of college, and my family was like, you don't do that. But I was such a hippie, you know, I was like, no, but it's not what I love. It's not what I wanted to be doing. And I don't want to just go to school unless I know I love it. And so I took a year, and then that's when I found the Chicago School of Massage Therapy. And I went to their intro day, and I saw them working on people. I was like, this is it. This is what my grandma was doing. This is what I want to learn. And so that's what started the whole journey into healthcare for me. You know, massage was basically my gateway into the healthcare profession. And honestly, I went through massage school, and I still didn't know what my grandmother was doing. You know, her work just intuitive and special. And I, to this day, have no idea how she was able to accomplish the things that she could, but I just keep trying. I figure the more knowledge I gain, the closer I'll get.
Wow. So she wasn't alive after you went to school, I guess, massage?
Yeah. Well, my grandmother was still around, actually. She passed away while I was in chiropractic school. And you know, but I would ask her, I'd be like, well, first of all, she thought it was very funny that there was a school where you could train to become a massage therapist. She was like, what? And then she was like, and people are going to pay you for that? And I was like, yes, Grandma, like, it'll be a profession. And she was like, wow. So she just thought it was all just really comical, you know. And but then I remember when I opened my first massage studio, you know, my grandmother was there, and her favorite color was cobalt blue. So she wore her favorite cobalt blue, and she was seated in a chair, and many people knew that she was an inspiration for me. So she was treated like royalty. They were like, oh, this is her grandmother, you know, and my grandmother was just like, yes, thank you, you know, like the queen, you know, working with the paparazzi. But at that point, she didn't do the work anymore. And, you know, when I would kind of ask her, she would just be like, I just do it. You know, she, like, the knowledge that I was trying to get from her, I couldn't quite
do it.
Out. She was just like, just put your hands on them. It'll all work out. And I was like, okay, well. So it was a little hopeless. I wasn't going to get, you know,
much of the instructor, huh?
The instruction. Yeah, she was like, you went to school. I didn't even do that. You know more, you know. And I was like, okay, well.
Yeah, the traditions of just being intuitive or knowing like a certain way of doing something can always seem so simple, but then like when you try to implement them, they're not as easy, right? They're just like, well, that was supposed to work like this. And then you're like, let's see if we can adapt that. Okay, you know, and you're kind of on the spot to try to figure things out. So what made you go into chiropractic school after being in massage once you had
you know, when I was so fortunate, I was at the Chicago School of Massage Therapy at a really wonderful pivotal moment in time. There were all these incredible instructors. It was very vibrant, the school. The owner at the time, who is now deceased, Bob King, he he started or actually, I'm not sure if he started it, but he was the first president of the American Massage Therapy Association. So he was a major pioneer in legitimizing massage, especially because it had a really bad reputation here in Chicago. And so he was one of the people that was really trying to bring it forward and into a more healthcare oriented environment. And he really believed in the necessity of it for wellness. And I was around all of these people at a really dynamic time. And I was really lucky. They saw a lot of potential in me and nurtured me. And Bob King, over the years, I would tutor students that were about to drop out of the program. And because I was like, no, anybody can do this. Just if they're not strong academically, it doesn't mean they're not going to be great massage therapists. They just need a little bit of help. And so part of my work at the school was to help get them through the program. And at that time, the study room was right next to his office. They were separated by a wall, but the top was open. And so he could always hear me talking and tutoring with the students. And he was like, I want you to be a teacher here at the school. And I was like, I graduated from massage school at 21, which at the time was unheard of. It was usually a change of careers. And so the population of the school was older. I was like, Bob, nobody is going to listen to me. I'm like their child's age. I look even younger than that. I was like, no one will take me seriously. And he really pursued it for a number of years until I finally became a teacher in the program. And then I was mentored under all these wonderful instructors that had been there for a long time. And in the process, I was able to TA for some guest lecturers that would come and show different techniques. And so my knowledge in massage really got expanded through being a beneficiary of just being a fly on the wall with all of these great thinkers and great therapists. And so it just got to the point where I felt like I wanted to be more of an advocate for people. And I really believed in conservative care before going into surgery, before, being on really heavy medications. And I decided that I needed to become a physician in order to really be able to voice that, because I had worked with some people that I really felt shouldn't have surgery. And I was never going to call their surgeon and be like, I'm their massage therapist, and I really would like for you to reconsider carpal tunnel surgery. It was just not going to happen. And so that's when the path started to transition to chiropractic school. But in the meantime, during all of that, I was dancing in a dance company here in Chicago. And I was like, wow, if I go to school, I'm not going to be able to dance, and that's not going to go well. Part of me is going to shrivel. I won't be able to sustain the academics if I'm not being able to do something physical as well. And so I worked with that idea for a while, and it seemed impossible, to be honest. I didn't really know anybody who'd done anything similar. And I finally found the school, the University of New Mexico, which had a great academic program, but then they also had a degree in dance. And I thought, oh, well, if I'm a dance major, my responsibility will be on dance. And then I can do pre-med with all of my extra classes, that you can take. And so I thought that was brilliant. Nobody else thought it was brilliant. Everybody else thought it was confused. But I knew that I really needed something to hold me accountable for the physicality. And if that was my major, then I could excuse, not studying more in my sciences or something. But I knew that if I went the other way around, that I would take my sciences so seriously that if I was just going to dance classes, I would make excuses for myself to not do that in favor of the academics. Wow. And so that's how it happened that I got my degree in dance, with all my electives being in pre-med and all of my advisors being really confused. My dance advisor was like, why are you taking organic chemistry too? And I was like,
you never know when you're going to whip that out in a dance, performance.
Yeah, I often fantasize.
It is related though, right?
Yeah, it is so related.
And you do, it's not just any dance, it's how do you pronounce it? Flamenco. I always say it wrong, but flamenco?
It's with a harsh C-O instead of a G-O.
Flamenco.
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 So,
I know it's tough ones.
and if anybody doesn't know what that is, that's when dancers are wearing really, really high heels and you're dancing.
Yes.
So I am also Monserrat's trainer. So we get to actually exchange, it's like we're looking at our reflection in each other in some ways, because, her body as a dancer is very similar to the unwinding that I'm doing as a former gymnast. And, so maybe we can go down that road as well, because I did want to focus. I also wanted to talk about spinal health, and especially for athletes who have a very flexible midsection. So, but they're very strong. So sometimes it can be a little deceiving to help athletes like that, because you see that they're strong, so you assume there's like this stability in the midsection, but it also has to be flexible. So there is some instability there and some overcompensation that happens, but it's very, very subtle. And those are the things that you've been helping me with, and it's made a tremendous difference. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that, especially since you just finished a workshop for spinal health workshop.
The interesting thing is that I think, especially as movers dancing in front of mirrors or performing, to me, class is very performative. You're trying to please your teacher. So you're trying to accomplish whatever they are asking of you to the best of your ability. And I think one of the things that we learn is how to become master compensators, and so with people that I find train in more in the arts, there's an ability to fake good movement that is really interesting, that I don't often find in other types of athletes. Like I never see runners faking good running.
That's true.
But I can see a dancer willpowering their way through some turns, and I'm just like, it is amazing that they can make it look like, but they're actually not using the right muscles, and so one of the things that's really important for me to teach dancers, especially contortionists. I work with a lot of contortionists, talk about like hypermobility and necessary control, is that they need to really let go of thinking that they're not good at what they do if we have to take them back to the basics to really show them how to be strong. That it's not me criticizing their 8 years of hard work, that it's not me telling them that they're not going to be able to do something in the future. It's just, kind of changing the way that they use their bodies. And the one thing I think that is a big misconception about dancers and other aesthetic athletes like that is that they are generally flexible. And the thing is that oftentimes we train flexibility into one particular region or direction. And then we can build a lot of tightness in other areas. But if people don't really understand the activities or the particular style that they do, for example, I was saying I work a lot with contortionists, and they're so bendy. I have to completely wipe that from my mind and look segmentally, because a lot of times there's compensation above and below areas that are really mobile. And I have that as well. And many other good people, like one of my dance teachers used to say, does that make them a bad person? No, it just means that they have this to work on, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's today or on Sunday when I was working with the dancers, I always, because we tend to self-select into activities that we're going to be good at. So a lot of times people that are very mobile, very hyperflexible will gravitate towards dance because it rewards all of that mobility. And so a lot of times we think more mobility, I want more. And really, hopefully what they're getting is also the control and the strength. And so a lot of times that's what I look at. I try not to get, because it's so easy to get excited when you see somebody that has all this range of motion and you're like, oh, that's great, but then they don't have the ability to control it. And so teaching them that those are two different things has become really important. And something that I never believed in as a dancer, which is strength training, you know, I was just like, I'm plenty strong. I'm a dancer. Like, what more do you want from me? You know? And as I became educated, I went to chiropractic school and I did the master's in sports and exercise science, and then consequently had to start doing a lot of those things in order to pass my classes. I was like, I was a fool. You know, this is of utmost importance. And so now I really try to convince all of my own aesthetic athletes that, you know, weight training would really benefit them. And the people that do try it end up really gaining a lot of success. You know, I know, Allison, you've also worked with quite a few people, you know, and it's fascinating to see how the bodies really absorb the information. Because they're already so trained, you know, and
because you don't lose the flexibility so much as you just learn how to brace better when you need to brace. And then, you know, and another point I wanted to bring up, like with gymnasts too, you train the body to be hyper flexible by, you know, over splits and things like that. And you don't realize that, you know, you are forcing the body into a position, but there could be some compensation mechanisms where maybe your pelvis tilts forward a little bit more to get into that split better. But what that's doing is it's rearranging kind of how the hip is functioning, is standing and walking and stuff like that. And so, you know, you kind of sacrifice one thing for the other and without noticing as much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see it all the time. And I'm already working with dancers, I thought was really challenging. But then when I started getting the circus performers, I was just like, I would be like, wow, look at their arm, you know, and I was just like, don't get distracted, you know, by how awesome their ability to move is, you know. I had to then really get almost even more thoughtful in my evaluations, because some of the evaluations that I had, you know, especially in chiropractic school, a lot of what we were taught was for lack of mobility. Right. And so, you know, how do we restore motion? How do we restore mobility? And so when you're working from the opposite direction, you know, I just didn't have a lot to go on. I had to reach out and find the information and ask other people and, you know, try to deduct it in reverse for myself.
Yeah. I liked how you talked about people choose in the beginning, even though it might be a feeling of subconscious, like I don't really know why I picked this, but then later on you find out that there's actually a neurological component to the like your vision and your vestibular and how well those are doing in your body, that you will automatically, out of those kind of inner knowing that, okay, my balance is maybe better, or my vision is better, or whatever. If it's not so, then you'll pick other things. So then like people then find themselves not a sports specific person because maybe they have really bad vestibular, but they don't even know it because they don't have like vertigo, or they don't have inner ear issues or of any kind. And so the neurological function that a lot of what I've been studying kind of shows up a lot. And then when you find out, that makes so much more sense why you went down that path. And then the mobility parts, I love how you talked about that, because one of that problem that kind of keeps coming through is that their mapping in their brain has taught them to be okay in a hyperextended position, because like you said, they fake the posture. There's always supposed to be a smile. Their arms are always out here. They're always like, I can make you think I'm in this beautiful position, but I'm in pain all the way up from head to toe.
Yeah. There's a term in dance that says fake it till you make it.
Yeah, well, it's all over the place.
And it's very true.
Yeah, I've adopted that into all parts of my life. But yeah, right. It is really, it's, you know, when I first started working with people that were so mobile, you know, I would say, okay, I know that they're going to be mobile in these directions, so look at the other ones. And I remember I had one dancer that I asked her, okay, you know, can you cross your legs? Like, you know, because she was very flexible into open splits. And so I just wanted her to cross one knee over the other. And she was like, and as soon as she did that, her whole low back curved under. you know, because she was just so tight into that external rotation, she worked on that and practiced it so much that then to be able to just get to midline and cross over, it wasn't very possible. And for somebody that isn't, you know, thinking about them in that way, you would miss that completely. And so, you know, that ended up being a big part of what we needed to work on, because it was showing up in a lot of places. But yeah, it's incredible how much we like go in directions. We're like, this seems easy. Maybe I'll try that.
Yeah, well, we're prone to go into being comfortable, right? We don't want to always go into the uncomfortable unless we seek it for a reason, right? One of the things I noticed about dancers is they're prone to go into Pilates, the idea of the core strengthening. But I have also noticed kind of an irony. They work in such a way that helps supposedly support the core based on Pilates' original way of helping someone with like low back problems and stuff like that. But I find they actually have more of a compensation, even more so when they come off doing years of Pilates too. And it's really interesting concept, because you think that they're working as we all, you know, talk about it in words, but it's a bigger picture. There's not just the core. It's supposed to, there's not really a core. There's like the aspect of the body functions in certain ways. And so when you think of all of them trying to strengthen the core, they're really kind of making more attention to it, but they're not really being able to be aware of that, like compensation part. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Totally. Yeah. One of the things that I find really interesting is that because there's so much, you know, dancers can have a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction, which I think initially, if we think about it, that seems a little bit odd until we realize, you know, they're just always gripping and pulling through that area so much that it just can become hypertonic like anything else. And, but it can be very surprising to people because they're like, no, but they're so strong and they're so flexible. Like, why would they have pelvic floor dysfunction? You know? And the interesting thing about dance and Pilates too, is that it's really wonderful for people that don't want to do any other kind of strength training or resistance training. It can be really great. But it can almost be too close, you know, to what they're already doing and training. And it can continue to perpetuate that really slow control, that very deep internal strength. And sometimes, like, I feel like they just need to learn power, you know, they need to, and so that's where the cross training becomes interesting, because it's like, well, what is this person doing in their particular dance style? And what can be a supplement to that will actually be a cross training instead of more of the same.
Yeah, and we all have this issue of not totally being aware of if our muscles are contracting well enough. So if you can't relax well, you can't contract well. So there's this feeling of, oh, I'm relaxed, but then if you were to touch maybe your posterior delt, you would know that doesn't fire very well, and you're kind of like, oh, well, I didn't know that maybe that hypertonicity has actually made my muscle weaker. So, you know, those compensations seem to come quite like a light bulb on when you kind of get your body to kind of see, like, this point and this point need to come together. Do you feel this? And then, you know, that sensory input comes in and they kind of just like, oh yeah, you know, but there's a whole like understanding of that. The pelvic floor actually could be a little bit more tighter, and you don't need to keep contracting it to keep it from prolapsing or something like that. You actually need to relax it 5 times more than you need to contract it.
Exactly.
And they even say that this in runners. If you can get a runner to actually relax their pelvic floor, their gait will get better, their movement will get better, but they have to relax, which is, you know, counterintuitive to what you're doing in terms of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's and then that of course relates to the spine, because if you're always, you know, contracting those smaller muscles and pulling in all the time, which is kind of what Pilates I see people getting trained in just doing the smaller movements and holding longer, which is kind of should be the smaller percentage of your it should just be for a little while to do that, and then you graduate onto the power movements and then use the muscles that you've activated. Instead, it's a little bit in the reverse of what is really recommended or should be done. So yeah, because I mean, if you think about runners, dancers, gymnasts, they're all like doing really powerful movements. They need to have that quick, they have to have the muscles trained to move quickly, and especially like the psoas. So, and that's one of the reasons it can get over tightened and cause dysfunction in the spine, because there's some dysfunction in the area because it's not being trained properly.
Yeah. And, it's so funny because often when I talk to people about core strengthening, Maya, kind of back to what you were saying, I ask people, what does the core mean to you? And, I get a lot of different answers, and I'm like, okay, so what does the core mean to you now if that person is holding on to a trapeze? And they're like, I'm like, what is the core? Where is the core then? Or what if they're in a handstand? Or, a break dancer in the middle of, some spins where they're going from their back to their legs, from back to, where is the core there, And so I think a lot of times anatomy, and for a necessary reason, we study anatomy from anatomical position, so we can all be on the same page talking about the same things, right? And then we graduate to kinesiology, and now all of a sudden everything is like topsy-turvy. But I think it's really important, and the fundamentals in that way. I used to teach anatomy, so I definitely believe in it. We all need a good baseline, but then, graduating into a school of thought about what does stabilization mean, and proper stabilization in order to be able to produce proper healthy movement. Because if we do anything once or twice, that's not the big deal. That's not the problem. And it's not that one thing that's going to be, detrimental for your whole life, but it's when you do that 1,000 times in a way that is not mechanically sound, that is going to be a problem. If you are driving on a road and the road is slanted a little bit, that's not going to wear out your tires. You're going to survive. Your car is going to be fine. But if you do that every day, that's when your car gets out of alignment, and you need to rotate your tires and all of that. And so I try to use analogies like that for dancers, because it's, everybody, but for a lot of my artists, it's not that one thing only once. It's the accumulation that really ends up giving you the reason to have to manage it and treat it and do self-care.
Yeah. And I like to add, because I'm really passionate about it, but then we call it the mapping of the brain. So your GPS, basically knowing where your body and space, but also knowing, like I said, the contractile mapping. These things have to be always revisited, because the neural flow that goes through from your brainstem down into your rest of your body parts need to be communicating. And if you're not allowing that neural flow to keep going, the brain is just going to take over. And then that brain, it doesn't matter how many times you stretch, doesn't matter how many times you do weights, it's going to say, we still don't fail, this is safe, and you need to kind of come back and show us it's safe, whether you use external cueing to help the body kind of move. There's nothing more than just sitting there and kind of going through a check to see if everything's firing neurologically.
Yeah, I picture it oftentimes, even when you were just describing it now, I picture it like, a cat that always roams around the rooms, like, that chair is still there, great. Oh, those drapes, they still reach the floor, I can rub, okay, great. My food bowl, that's still there. And, but if you move any one of those things, the cat's like, what happened over here? Why is this, and so, I feel like the body does the same thing. That's why technique is so important. They always say, like, all the masters, all the singers, like, they still do scales. You see a violinist, they're always practicing fingering technique, same for guitarists and dancers. That technique is, the basic, most central component of the art form, and it needs to be revisited. I think any mover, I'm sure a baseball player, they're not like, oh, I hit a home run once, like, I'm good now, they'll be perfect forever. We all need to practice.
Yeah, it's like the lottery, right? You get maybe one ticket out of a million times you get to practice. right? So
Yeah.
it's like, that is like the picture of like what you're looking for is like, you know, if you get bored with the basics, then what you're really doing is denying the growth of any of that. You know, it's like, you've got to keep coming back, because that will help you, because as we're aging and as we're changing, and, you know, and I kind of liked a lot of the stuff in the not just primal workshops and stuff like that, but there's a dynamic neural, it's from the Prague School, and they do a lot.
DNS, dynamic neural
DNS, yeah.
stabilization.
And they do that great basis of like literally going back to infant stages and learning how to do, like, it's not like Feldenkrais, but they more or less help you realize like that winding that you guys are talking about. It is that, you know, like a can, like if you had a Coke can, right? It's nice and solid, and it moves, you know, the labels move together. And then if you take just the air out and you just squeezed it, that's how we come as adults. We don't do the reaching like a child, come from that the navel or wherever, that the alignment constantly comes, because we've already gotten so used to going, oh yeah, I'm going to pick that up over there. But children have to be able to see what they're grasping, right? So they into it, and then they're so. Hold on, I think I lost my speaker. Hold on.
You're good now. Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So that part of it is constantly revisiting. Can you really move like a child again? Kind of bringing that back.
DNS was a major influence for me. When I was studying in school, I was introduced to it, and I've taken many of the workshops, and I just kind of, whenever they come back around, I keep taking them, because every time I gather a little bit more. And it was really studying DNS and a lot of the Prague School of Rehab that has fully taught me how to position you know, people's pelvis and rib cage, and use of their inner abdominal pressure. And that was actually a lot of what I taught at this workshop on Sunday. You know, I had the slides of DNS up there and showing, you know, the top and the bottom and how you create the cylinder. And, you know, because so many people often talk about, oh, stabilize your core, or belly button to spine, or suck it in, or, you know, whatever the cueing is. But none of us really know what they mean. And sometimes they don't know what they mean either. They just know that that's what they heard, so they say it too. And that is, you know, there's a couple of things in my practice that I am really, really passionate about trying to teach people. One is proper core stabilization. The other is, you know, how to care for their feet and keep dexterity and strength and arch support. And, you know, if those are the two things, if, you know, can kind of move forward in people's lives, even once they're past needing care, if I can instill in them the importance of having proper positioning and stabilization of their core for movements to maintain health, and healthy feet, I will feel really proud.
Those go a long way.
Like a broken record, because I hear myself all day, you know, but
yeah.
It sounds like you're already doing that, which is amazing, because it is the most crucial, like, parts of you that need to kind of, even if it's just a body awareness, right? Because a lot of times, you know, there are many adaptations that our body will do for us. And until you can just, like, you know, if you're going to have some deformities or something that comes along with aging, it's not to say, oh, you're wrong or you have some issue, but to say, okay, what can we do to minimize the effects of your balance, or what can we minimize that you have less pain in a daily day, you know? So any of that information is so valuable. Like, that is incredible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Allison and I, we work on it, you know, like she was saying, we mirror each other physically a lot. And it's so funny to see it, you know, because when you can have the knowledge, and the internalization is a whole other thing, you know, but I think one of the gifts of understanding it and knowing it is that then we can search out providers that will help us attain those personal goals as well. You know, it makes
absolutely. Yeah, which I found fascinating because like things like my big toe that's been dislocated many times in my career is
Mhm.
is really, I mean, just by addressing that, my hip totally started functioning differently. It was kind of amazing. I mean, even though I know this stuff, I'm still amazed by how just addressing those small things. Because we think about our feet, if your feet are not able to adapt and kind of contort over, if that's a word, over like rocks or anything you're stepping over, or adapt to it, then there's a problem there with your hip will take that it will start restricting, or you'll take it in the knee. So again, it's like, the feet, we're on the feet all the time. We have to make sure they're mobile, they're functioning properly. Our toes are able to spread. You turn me on to the correct toes, which you put those plastic kind of, I can't describe them, but you put them between your toes and they keep your toes out you could spread your toes. If you can't do that physically, that will kind of put it in the position. And so just being able to really widen your base of support is so incredibly important. And especially for balance, like Maya mentioned, that's going to make people feel that it'll bring your foundation into and ground you a little bit more. So, and as well, like really improve your neurological function.
Yeah, well, and another big influence for me was Mike Boyle with his
I love,
model of mobility stability.
Absolutely. I use his stuff a lot too.
Yeah, and it's just amazing, how many times, like if I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed with something that's happening with the person's body, if I'm just like, okay, let's look at the joints from the bottom up, because when you are coming in contact with the ground, that big toe function is fundamental, right? It's the most important.
Yeah.
And then how the arch is doing, and then how the ankle is doing. And you are bound to run into the body. The body is willing to tell you. You just have to focus and clear your mind and, be attentive to the messages, because the body is going to be doing the same thing when you're there and when you're not, so if you can just get in tune with it and really analyze somebody, take your time, which is what can be challenging for some providers, depending on the types of offices that they work in, but yeah, that joint by joint approach has really served me well, because it gives me something to anchor to when I'm feeling like there's 10 things going on. I'm like, okay, let's take this literally joint by joint, step by step, and let's see where things are. And then, after the joints, then looking at muscle and strength and stabilization and breathing patterns and things like that. But especially in the beginning, as I called myself a little giraffe chiropractor, like a baby giraffe, because I felt like I came out of chiropractic school and I was really wobbly in my leg. You just know so much, but what you don't really know yet is how to titrate that down so that you can be really specific for a particular patient. And that always really helped to ground me. I was like, okay, if nothing else, I can look at the joints, how they're moving, and then, treat based on that. It'll give me time to then think about this person more, so that then the next time I see them, I can maybe look at their stability. I can look at, their breathing patterns and things like that. And I'm really grateful for, kind of his awareness of building that model, because I feel like so many people have benefited from that.
I agree. Yeah. Valuable information for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have, I guess we could go into some basic, like the biggest, let me see how I can put this here. The biggest issues that you see with dancers in their spine, like I'm guessing it's lower back pain and possibly, even though you think that dancers have really strong glutes, there could be some definite overcompensation, especially with turnouts. And so is there anything that you see pretty consistently with every dancer, that an issue that needs to be addressed, and maybe some way, if somebody is a dancer and they're having issues where they can start?
Yeah, one of the first things that I look for is their relationship between their ribs and their pelvis. a lot, I mean, every dancer is so different and their compensation patterns are so different that I think the thing that I end up looking for the most is what is at the root for them. You know, a lot of times, if I treat different types of dancers, so if I have dancers that dance barefoot, often flat feet can become a problem if they don't know how to control their arch, which will then travel into knee issues, hip issues. But then I also treat a lot of dancers, since when I dance flamenco, you know, we dance in about a 1.5 to 2 inch heel.
Right.
And those shoes are all the things that I advise people against in general footwear, you know, and here I am becoming stronger in that position, which is why I have to compensate by rehabbing so much in the opposite direction so that I don't, it's the cost of admission for that dance style, you know, is that I need to really take care of my feet. It's not that you tell people don't do the things that you love. I would never tell a rock climber don't use those terrible rock climbing shoes. I love to rock climb too, you know, but then you have to do whatever you need in order to rehab through that. And so with dancers that are in heels in particular, or that dance on the balls of their feet. So for example, belly dancers don't dance in shoes, but they dance in releve a lot. And so they tend to really tilt their pelvises forward as a compensation for that. If they don't have the strength and support to balance on their toes, then they do all kinds of, you know, their spines end up looking like jelly beans. Same thing with flamenco dancers. They really have to learn how to control and bring the pelvis underneath because they're dancing in a high-heeled shoe. And that position just does that to you. It's, again, it's not that you're a bad person. It's just that that position is going to make your pelvis go anterior. And then with a lot of my circus performers, a lot of what I see is inability to stabilize the shoulder properly using serratus. In particular, serratus anterior tends to be very, very weak, or just overcompensated with deltoid bicep, tricep strength. And so people use, you know, these muscles that are a little bit more distal to try to perform some of the activities that should be a little bit more centered into the core of the body. And so then they end up with a lot of shoulder problems because their serratus, they never really fully taught it how to engage through all of those ranges of motion in the arm. And so I often will have issues with people that do circus performing. Their shoulders tend to be a big deal. So yeah, usually with dancers, it's things from the waist down. Circus performers, contortionists, you know, from the waist up. As a generalization, I mean, people always throw that out the window. But
so, could you talk a little bit about your passion from flamenco dancing and why you chose it?
You know, I saw it as a small child. I grew up in Mexico City, and I remember because the weather is so nice there, they have a lot of open air malls, and I remember there was a stage with some performers, which was very typical to have. And I remember walking by and I just saw this woman and I was just like, wow, you know, she just looked so strong. And whereas a lot of other dance styles, it was about looking as soft as possible or like as demure as possible. And this woman was like, you know, and I was just like, yeah, I get it, you know. I found it just really, I know it definitely shook something inside of me, you know, it caught my attention, even though I loved dance in all forms and in general. But that image really stuck with me. And I always felt like, in my heart, I always felt like a dancer, you know, I just always was moving and experiencing my body. And so my mom put me in various dance classes, but there was also a period of my life where I felt like if you weren't dancing ballet, you weren't really a dancer. You were just kind of like a wannabe dancer because ballet was the dance form, right? And it wasn't until I was 21 that I went and took my first dance class that wasn't really a ballet class. And that was a belly dancing class. And I was just so surprised. Everything that they were asking my body could do. It's not that it looked perfect or, you know, performance level at the first class, but it felt achievable and attainable and doable by my body. And in the process of being in that dance company, then I came to know of some flamenco dancers here in Chicago. And once my contract was up with them, then I started taking flamenco, because I was like, oh, now I know I'm a dancer. I mean, I was living a dancer life. And then I went to flamenco, and it shattered every belief that I understood the body or how to move it, because flamenco is incredibly hard. And
Yes.
so I left this dance form that my body, could really do well and gravitate to. And I completely devoted myself to this dance form that is, super challenging and hard. But that was part of the love for it, was that there was so much to learn. You have to learn so much about music. The rhythms are very different from many other dance styles. The singing is, the stories that they tell in their song are of survival and love and family and community. And I was really drawn to it. And I have to say, that my other movement teachers have been really influential in my life, but my flamenco teachers, I have three main ones, and they have just, the things that they've taught me in dance class, I think because it's such a hard art form, you really have to know in your heart that this is what you want to study, because it doesn't reward you very easily,
Yeah.
And like, there was one movement where I was first, I was just starting to learn, and I was like, Wendy, how do I do this? And she turned and she looked at me, she was like, you just do.
Yes. Yes.
And I was waiting for like that, okay, first you put this foot here and that, and I was like, no, okay. And that was kind of an introduction of what flamenco was going to be like. It's just like you and your willpower show up.
Yeah.
Work hard, and that's how you do it.
Kind of like your grandmother.
Exactly. I have apparently a long history of these women that are, like, what do you mean?
Well, the
Just
dance
do
always
it.
seems to feel like an empowerment of confidence. Like that person carries that into, and you don't see one doubt. Like that's like that. But then the beauty of that soulful cry of like especially when the women sing, it seems to be this like guttural, like deep part of you that has to come out and just claim your rightfulness, right? And so I always loved the dance. It's very passionate, and it seems like it's just like a lot of stomping, but what you clearly see is the timing, like that timing that you have to find in yourself. That's amazing. Like I just I'm like, wow, it's in the energy and that constant, like, I'm on point right now. This is it. Like it's really kind of a fascinating dance.
Yeah. It demands your presence for sure. And all of the people that are working with you, that's really also a beautiful thing, because you learn trust in your community. Your guitarist, your singer, your percussionist, you're all working together. And the goal is, if you're working with a group whose focus is on nurturing each other as performers and as artists, is that you kind of help each other out through the performance, and it teaches you a lot about what it means to show up completely, not only yourself, but also have compassion if something goes wrong or something. You don't have time for blame. You don't have time for what went wrong, what's going on. You just pick up and you continue and you make it happen. And which is slightly horrifying when you're performing.
Yes.
But that's part of, I think, that people can perceive that teetering. You're kind of teetering on the brink of chaos a lot of times. And you just, by working together, you make it happen. And that feels really good at the end.
Oh, awesome. Do you still dance now? Do you do?
Yeah, I'm in a company in Portland. And I have to say, like, they make my life in Portland. They're just the most wonderful group of people. And what I'm describing in terms of like that sense of community and support and love is definitely what I get from them. And so it allows me to, not only be a doctor on one side, but many of the people that are in this company are also professionals in their own right. We have architects and masters in education and engineers and bioscientists. Like, I don't know how these women all ended up dancing flamenco, but we're there. And so the professional side of us is really supported in addition to our artistic sides. And it really allows me to feel like I'm expressing my whole self, and I think what I've seen with many professionals that are trying to work with these populations is that oftentimes they will have retired from those activities. And so they understand and have it in their mind what it takes to work with these people. But I've definitely had a lot of people say that they're really grateful that I'm still dancing and still living it, because when I give them recommendations, especially if you have to tell somebody that they have to stop their activities for some time, that's often the most devastating thing. But they know that if I will try to keep it to a minimum. I'm fully aware that losing that time is a really big deal. And so I often will try instead to modify and give them different ways of doing something, and so that they're not further injuring themselves, but so they can continue to train in some capacity. And that extends then to my athletes as well, because I have that understanding of what a big deal it is to not have that consistency in your training of your technique.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's where that
I've had a number of my own personal experiences with different medical providers that have shaped me quite a bit. And one of them was I got a tendonitis in my knee, or a muscle crossing my knee, when I was dancing in Albuquerque. And I was dancing about 25 hours a week. And I went to go see this chiropractor there who had come really highly recommended. And he evaluated me, and he was like, oh yeah, you have a tendonitis, you have to sit out for 2 weeks. And I was like, 2 weeks?
Do you know what's going to happen to me?
Yeah. And I was like, that's 50 hours of training.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Because I really needed to know that is what he needed to understand.
Right.
That to lose 50 hours of training meant that I was going to have to work for a month and a half to try to regain that, and he was like, oh, how much do you dance a week? I was like 25 hours. And he was like, oh yeah, he thought I was just taking like a class a week or something. And so then he ended up modifying my treatment plan to be more conscientious of really how hard I was training. And I was still restricted from things because I needed that to heal, but he gave me some other ideas of ways to be able to take class and not injure myself, or not prolong the injury. But I think that that's really important. Whatever our population is, whoever we're trying to treat and serve, I think it's really important to understand what you're asking them to do when you're asking them for some changes, and if they have a feeling that you don't really fully have a consciousness of what it is that they're asking their bodies to do, then it'll make it a lot less likely that they will follow your advice and your treatment plan. But if they feel like you understand them, and if I ask somebody to not dance for 2 weeks, I'm like, okay, look, I'm asking you for this, and I know what that means, and this is why you need it. And I wouldn't be asking you for that if this really wasn't what was necessary for you to heal. And then that makes a really big difference, but if you're just kind of willy-nilly throwing, days around or times, and you're not conscientious of their needs, because you tell somebody don't dance for 2 weeks that's used to it, you may as well also send them to go get a prescription for Prozac, because their endorphins are going to drop,
right?
Their nutrition is going to go wackadoodle, their hormones are going to go wackadoodle, all of these things that they rely on will be thrown into a tailspin, so it's good to be conscious of all of that too.
Yeah.
That's
a great point.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's a whole nother
it just reminds me of like an addict, right?
I was thinking about like the nervous system with that, and how that kind of thing really becomes addictive.
Well, you crave it, so there's a little part of
I don't know if addictive is the right word, but just maybe it is. I don't know, but it's just
it is in terms of
it? Okay.
The analogy, what I mean is like an addict who isn't ready to give up their drug.
Right.
The body has it already in the system. I mean, think about what you're, like she said, you are cold turkey in it. And that's hard on the body, because it's seeking not only sensory input, it's seeking what it means to have your visual, what it happens to your, like, how fast you're moving in space, everything. It's like you take the whole world and you just bring them down into this little spot, and then you ask the nervous system to adapt to it. It's like shutting somebody in a corner. It's not going to work.
No.
It makes them nuts.
Yeah. That's why it's the same. I know, like with
And then they
gymnasts
go and hurt themselves.
you tell the gymnasts to take a day off or to play for the day, and they want to make themselves go in and work harder. You know, it's just, it's the thing that if we've constantly been training our bodies and our nervous systems to function well in this way, then we're gonna seek that out constantly, and we're not gonna feel comfortable if we're not in that mode, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna feel really weird. Yeah.
One of the issues is then where does it get it? It signals what it's seeking for, and people start to pick up, like, other things, like, whether it's through food or through, maybe drinking or doing something that else stimulate the brain. It's hard on the body. I mean, I just remember when I did cold turkey for Ironmans, it was my choice, but I did not know what I was asking for.
Yeah.
I thought I was saving myself, and then really what I was doing was challenging myself even more. But then if you've also been that one where you kind of push yourself through pain all the time, which, dancers do that, you have to be on performance. You can't all of a sudden just grab your knee and go, oh, that hurts. Most of the time it's someone is down and have totally torn something, it's not like,
Yeah. I know. I just think of all the times, like I'm a dancer too. So I remember just this, like, I don't know, maybe last year or the year before, it's a little embarrassing, but yeah, just kept, my back, it feels like it's about to, feels a little unstable. I'm okay. I'm just going to keep going. And then all of a sudden I'm on the sofa with back spasms, like this is of course before I met Monserrat, but it's like, I just, you just push through it. You're like, I'm fine. I don't want to stop right now. I want to keep going, and it is, I guess maybe addiction is a good description for it, because, you just push through. And I guess that's the whole point of our conversation, right? Is to know when to not push through and to actually focus on the little, the subtleties of the body. So
yeah, because rest, like just even seasons, of time but you have to be, one, do it conscientiously, and two, replace with other things that are stimulating and fulfilling to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just go from being super busy to really idle, and that's not good for people that are moving.
Not at all. So, Monserrat, can you share with our audience how to find you, what your offerings are, and all that?
Well, online is one of the best ways to kind of flow into my universe. Heart Healthcare for Artists can be found. You have to spell the whole thing out. Heart Healthcare for Artists. It's very long, but on Instagram, I put a lot of shorter videos, inspirational things that I see, experiences that I have with some of my performers that they allow me to put, short little case studies or notes on. On Facebook, I usually share longer videos, which sometimes I'm just talking about a topic that I noticed in the clinic that week, or sometimes I'm interviewing some artists about always a baseline of healthcare and how it's worked for them or not worked for them in their careers, difficulties and successes. And then I have a website which kind of houses all of that, but that can also give a lot of information about how to contact me for workshops or talks, and also has the information for the clinic that I work in Portland. And so I work at Evolution Healthcare and Fitness, where Allison also works some of the time. And it's a wonderful place that promotes healing. It's got a clinic side with many different types of providers, and I happen to be fortunate enough to be one of them. And really, once you come into that clinic setting, it's great because we have so many good providers that we can refer to there that if you get in with one of us, then if there's other needs that you need that aren't our specialty specifically, then we can help people find great providers for that. And so a lot of people really enjoy our office for that reason. They feel like everyone kind of comes pre-screened, with really high quality providers. And so it's also a great place for training. So my website, Heart Healthcare for Artists, and then Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube for the other media content.
Cool.
That's great.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And it was really great to have you, share all your knowledge and wisdom and recap our personal experiences with our healing journeys and all that. So thank you again. Yeah.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Nice seeing you.
You too. Thank you.
With the next course that you teach and everything and the workshop, sounds like they're amazing.
Yeah, they're really, really fun. I'll be teaching another mobility and stability for dancers in Portland this fall. Cool. The dance studio that I work with, they've been asking me to bring it back. So that will be available. We're thinking probably around September once kids go back to school so that parents are, more able to come. We have a large population at our studio that have children. So nice. We're hoping to make it nice and available for all of them. And I'm trying to create some opportunities here in Chicago where I am right now to come back and teach some more workshops here too. So yeah, and if anybody is interested in having me host or if they're willing to host me somewhere, I definitely love to travel to different locations and bring the information.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Monserrat. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. See you next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.